In the headlines, the South and North Korea trade accusations Friday as a joint Seoul-Washington defense drills end, and Pyongyang says it's not sending its cheering squad to the upcoming Asian Games. Prime Minister Chung Hong-won urges rival political parties to break their deadlock and pass a set of bills aimed at reviving Korea's sluggish economy. And the WHO says the Ebola epidemic in West Africa could infect over 20,000 people and spread to more countries in the coming months. Welcome to Primetime News, live from Seoul. I'm Kang.
Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us this evening. Well, South Korea's annual joint military exercises with the U.S., the Ulchi Freedom Guardian, came to a close this week, and North Korea wasted little time in criticizing Seoul and Washington, accusing them of engaging in a war game. Exactly, and experts say there is a reason behind Pyongyang's hardline stance. Choi You-sun has more.
Suggesting renewed dialogue with us after dissolving inter-Korean ties with a war game with the U.S. is the height of shamelessness. Initially staying mum about Seoul and Washington's annual military training that ended Thursday, Pyongyang finally said its relations with a southern neighbor will not improve so long as the drills continue. It gave an ultimatum to Seoul to decide once and for all to withdraw from the exercise, which it considers a war game, if it truly wants better ties on the Korean peninsula. Late Thursday, North Korea announced it will not be sending a cheering squad to the upcoming Asian Games in the South Korean city of Incheon, blaming the South for not wanting their participation. Seoul rebutted the claims in response.
We are regretful that North Korea announced its cheering squad will not attend the Asian Games after falsely accusing the South of contending against their participation.
The North's hardline stance comes as the two Koreas are anticipated to seek dialogue. Pyongyang hasn't yet accepted Seoul's proposal for high-level talks, but experts forecast the regime will soon come to the table. And with a lineup of thorny issues between the two sides, such as the North's demand that the South lift sanctions on their joint commercial projects, it's likely that Pyongyang is seeking to get the upper hand in negotiations. Choi You-sun, Arirang News.
There's a sport capturing the attention of the North Korean regime, and it's not basketball, it's pro wrestling. And an international competition is being held this weekend in Pyongyang. Some observers see it as an attempt to boost relations with the U.S. and Japan through sports diplomacy. Our Kim Hyun-bin explains.
Several athletes arrive at Pyongyang Airport. They're all pro wrestlers here to take part in an international wrestling competition. There are some familiar faces, such as Bob Sapp and Jerome Lee Banner, who are well known in the wrestling world. But all eyes are on Japan's wrestler-turned-politician, Antonio Inoki.
I believe this event will be successful. I hope it serves as a stepping stone for international peace.
The head of North Korea's International Olympic Committee, Chang Un, greeted the athletes upon their arrival. North Korean state media has been extensively promoting the competition, airing previews and detailed introductions. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is known to take advantage of sports diplomacy to promote his country. But some experts say this could be a means to enhance relations with Japan. As Inoki had a meeting with the secretary of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, Kang Sok-chu, experts believe he might also be acting as a go-between for the Japanese government. The pro wrestling event comes as two nations look to improve bilateral ties, especially by dealing with the issue of Japanese nationals kidnapped by North Korean agents in the 1970s and 80s. Seoul-based Yonhap News reported, quoting diplomatic sources in Tokyo, that the two countries face difficulties in making progress in their government-level talks. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And let's stay with North Korea affairs and talk in depth with Professor Song Se-ryun joining us right here in the studio. Welcome. Thanks for coming in today.
Good to be here.
So what did you think of North Korea's decision not to send its cheering squad? Do you think it was really about the expenses, or do you think it was playing hard to get?
Well, my smart money would be on the hard-to-get side. The South has traditionally borne such expenses whenever there is a cheering squad coming down to the South. But this time, South has made it clear that they're going to follow the international, I guess, a convention,
protocol,
which the expense would be borne by the North, which is a sending party. But I think that it could be an excuse because there's a series of talks or the posturing going on from North and South, and both parties want to talk, I think, so that whenever this kind of situation arises, North Korea's response or the posture always has been demand more attention or raise the tensions to get, again, more attention, or be in a situation where they will try to get the upper hand. So hard to get is, I guess, another way of saying it.
Well, the Seoul-Washington joint annual military drills ended a day early, so now it seems as if we're in another abeyance, and with the door perhaps opening towards the U.S., given this apparent report of a high-level official going on some secret meeting with the North. Do you think there is potential for a Washington-Pyongyang bilateral talk, and if so, what would be the benefit of that?
Well, that report has not been confirmed, I don't think, but you can speculate that there is an intention from both sides. I mean, from the U.S. side is Kenneth Bae and abduction of the three Americans, so they want to resolve that issue. And from the North Korea, they always wanted to have some channels to get to the U.S. and get some kind of direct dialogue. But the truth is that these days the U.S. is too busy. Ukraine and ISIS in the Middle East, and also the domestic matters. So I think there is a kind of a North Korea fatigue that has set in Washington.
So what about Seoul's proposal for high-level talks with Pyongyang here on the peninsula, the inter-Korean talks? What does it need to hear from Seoul before it stops playing hard to get?
Well, they heard something when the Ulchi exercise was ended 1 day earlier. That could be interpreted as a kind of a gesture that we're willing to talk and we want to be in a little bit friendlier situation. But North Korea always has been predictably unpredictable, and they always wanted to get the upper hand in the talks. So cheerleading squad is one thing, but probably they're waiting for a more softening of the South Korean side.
Let's talk North Korea and Japan now. Pyongyang's cozying up with Tokyo seems to be losing some momentum, at least to our eyes and the press. Am I correct to say that there are some delays in lifting sanctions on North Korea?
I think that would be the case. Keeping with the theme that the North Korea wants to have some channels open because U.S. is not going very well. China has kind of turned their back on it. South Korea always had the hardline stance ever since Lee Myung-bak was a president. So Japan, it was a logical choice to at least try to see whether there are some avenues there. But from the Japanese point of view, probably there is not much incentive to get things complicated with North Korea.
All right. Well, Professor Song, thanks so much for coming in today and sharing your insight.
Thank you.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang Sean Lim and Kang Chery from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Korea's Prime Minister Chung Hong-won took to the airwaves this morning to urge lawmakers to stop bickering and get going on passing a slew of pending bills, including special legislation that would set up an investigation into the April ferry disaster. Kim Young-gil has this report.
Prime Minister Chung Hong-won says there's no more time to waste in passing long-pending legislation aimed at stimulating the economy.
At least 30 economic stimulus-related bills are related to improving the livelihoods of the people. Job creation and the economic recovery are lagging. Now is the time to get them passed.
Chang's remarks coincide with government efforts to reboot the economy. In recent weeks, the Finance Ministry has introduced a set of stimulus measures along with proposals for tax code revisions to induce money flows from businesses to households in the form of investment, salary hikes, and dividend payouts. The Prime Minister also urged lawmakers to pass the one piece of legislation that is keeping all the others held up, the one that would set up a probe into April's ferry tragedy. The rival parties remain deadlocked over the special Seoul ferry bill, with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy taking to the streets in protest and boycotting all parliamentary proceedings. The ruling Saenuri Party is digging in its heels and demanding that the opposition get back to work. The months-long partisan divide has indefinitely postponed annual parliamentary audits and pushed thousands of other bills awaiting review into the shadows. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The local real estate market is making positive gains, but other sectors in the economy are still struggling. Industrial output for July barely rose at all, while business sentiment among manufacturers dropped for the fourth consecutive month. Seong Ji-sun covers the bleak outlook.
The country's industrial output kept expanding in July, but the lackluster gain was yet another indicator that the much-anticipated recovery in domestic demand is not kicking in. Statistics Korea said Friday that production for all industries picked up by 0.2% last month, with the manufacturing sector expanding by more than 1% from June, helped by robust activities in the automobile and oil refinery industries. The pace of gains for all industries slowed considerably from 2.2% in June. Production in service sector inched down 0.4% from a month earlier, with activities among wholesalers and retailers and the financial industry all contracting by more than 1%. A separate indicator confirmed that Korean manufacturers are not expecting a full economic recovery anytime soon. The Bank of Korea announced Friday that the business sentiment index for manufacturers for August stood at 72, the lowest figure in more than a year and the fourth consecutive monthly drop following April's deadly ferry disaster. Bank officials say businessmen remain worried about weak domestic demand and abundant uncertainties in and out of the country. A rating below 100 means pessimists outnumber optimists. Consumers, however, expect rosier days ahead, with consumer sentiment at 107, up 2 points from the previous month. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Come September 9th, iPhone lovers may get their first peek at the new iPhone 6 model as a media event is scheduled that day in Cupertino, California. It would come a year after Apple introduced the iPhone 5S and 5C, and a week after its arch-rival Samsung is set to unveil its Galaxy Note 4 phablet. Reports say one or both models of the iPhone 6 with display sizes measuring 4.7 and 5.5 inches could be coming. And there are also expectations that Apple's long-awaited iWatch will be released on the same day.
Starting in September, Seoul will have 10 electric-powered taxis offering their services around the capital. The city government says they will run on a trial program through next April. And instead of the common orange paint job, the special rides will be sky blue, which is supposed to denote that they're better for the environment. The fare for the electric cabs will be the same as regular ones, starting at 3,000 won or less than $3. The cost for charging the cars will be paid by the city and the Korea Environment Corporation. The fall is fast approaching here in Korea, and so is wedding season. Weddings here used to be extravagant affairs that come with big budgets, but lately, a growing number of soon-to-be newlyweds are deciding to keep things simple and practical. Connie Kim tells us more.
Skipping the conventional photo shoot and dropping the bride and groom gift exchange process is what these newlyweds did when preparing for their wedding back in May. They rented a small house in the city for their wedding and only invited close friends and family.
We didn't want to spend a lot on a typical wedding ceremony like others, so we decided to skip the expensive gift exchanges between families. Even our wedding rings were only $500.
All the money the couple saved will go to a second honeymoon. More pairs are choosing to cut down the frills, and it's no wonder because saying "I do" in Korea can be an extravagant affair. Check out the statistics for yourself. With an average $24,000 that a couple spends on preparing for marriage, about 1/5 is spent on hunsu, a wedding tradition. Hunsu consists of furniture and other household items a bride buys to fill her new home that has been purchased by the groom, and it's symbolic of old patriarchal traditions. With Korea's long-standing patriarchal society slowly fading and soon-to-be married couples looking for a special experience, one-of-a-kind wedding ceremonies are on the rise. And industry insiders back this up, saying an increasing number of couples these days are going against wedding norms.
In Korea, there's an increasing number of people who have lived abroad, and naturally they have become receptive to the different wedding cultures. I think it has contributed to the recent growing number of couples holding unique weddings.
Kang says requests for chapel weddings and house weddings have become more popular to tie the knot while making ends meet. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting on the deepening crisis in Ukraine as the West condemns Russia for its role for the conflict in that region.
With more, we turn to Paul Yee at the News Center. Paul, Ukraine says it's now dealing with a full-scale invasion by Russian forces. How has the UN responded?
Well, the UN Security Council on Thursday expressed deep concerns about the escalation of violence in eastern Ukraine and called for an immediate ceasefire. NATO estimates 1,000 Russian troops are fighting alongside the separatists, a development that's also been confirmed by U.S. and British officials. U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power also accused Russia of manipulating and outright lying about their involvement. Russia's diplomat shot back and suggested Washington stop interfering in the affairs of sovereign nations. Earlier, Ukraine's Defense and Security Council said Russian tanks and military vehicles had rolled in and taken a border town as well as other parts of the country's southeast. The World Health Organization says the current deadly Ebola outbreak has infected more than 3,000 people in West Africa, and unless further action is taken, that number is expected to rise to 20,000 in the coming months. But there is hope. An experimental drug proven to be effective on monkeys will soon be tested on humans. Our Kwon So-ah tells us more.
The WHO warned on Thursday that the number of Ebola cases could rise to 20,000 as the infection is spreading at an uncontrollable speed. The virus has already killed more than 1,500 people, and there are at least 3,000 reported cases as of now. But the health agency believes the actual number could be up to 4 times higher than that. A high-level official at the WHO says the agency has been caught off guard by the scale of this outbreak.
That's not saying we expect 20,000 cases. That is not saying we would accept, more importantly, 20,000 cases. I think that's completely unacceptable.
The WHO is calling for a full-scale humanitarian response to the crisis, and that's going to require a lot of money.
Going forward, this is going to cost, we estimate, $489 million over the next 6 months. It is a big operation. We're talking well over 12,000 people operating over multiple geographies in very, very difficult and high-risk circumstances. It's expensive.
There's some hope on the horizon, though. An experimental Ebola vaccine developed by U.S. and British-based health institutes will soon be tested on humans. Tests have already proven successful on monkeys, and the initial human trial will be conducted on around 20 healthy adults at a National Health Institute of Health clinic in Maryland next week. If everything goes well, the second phase is expected to take place in Africa after strict scientific and ethical standards are met. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And turning now to Southeast Asia, Malaysia Airlines has announced it will slash nearly a third of its 20,000 staff as part of a major restructuring plan worth nearly $1.9 billion. The 42-year-old company will be delisted by the end of the year, which will give the Malaysian wealth fund Khazanah National full ownership of the carrier. Malaysia Airlines has been struggling with heavy losses following the devastating impact of two jetliner disasters this year.
The assignment and the objective of this exercise is to support a revival of a national carrier, but not at any cost. This is the key, actually.
The state fund did not give details on plans to reduce the carrier's global flight network, but said several of its European destinations would be reviewed. And finally, the internet search giant Google has announced that it's developing flying drones to deliver goods from medicine to even your next pizza. Let's take a look.
Throughout history, there have been a series of innovations that have each taken a huge chunk out of the friction of moving things around. Project Wing aspires to take another big chunk of the remaining friction out of moving things around in the world.
Google X, the company's special research division, said it had been testing out prototypes in Australia earlier this month and that the project had been in secret development for the past 2 years. Google's rival Amazon had also announced plans last year to use aerial drones for a home delivery service called Prime Air. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here next week.
Hello and welcome to sports. First up, Champions League football. Group stage is set as UEFA held a draw for Europe's premier club tournament, splitting up 32 teams into 8 groups. Defending champs Real Madrid headlines Group B with Liverpool, their biggest threats. But Group E with Bayern Munich, Manchester City, AS Roma and CSKA Moscow is the group of death as Roma joins 3 league champions. As for the Koreans in the competition, Son Heung-min's Bayer Leverkusen is in Group C, while Ji Dong-won and Borussia Dortmund play in Group D. Meanwhile, following the draw, Real's Cristiano Ronaldo took home the Best Player in Europe award for last year's stellar season. And heading to the LPGA's Portland Classic, South Korean Kim In-kyung leads the field at Columbia Edgewater after a nearly spotless first round. She rose quickly up the leaderboard, following up 3 birdies on the front 9 with 4 more on the back 9 to end the day at 7 under par. Meanwhile, for the men, the FedEx Cup playoffs continue on with the Deutsche Bank Championships opening on Friday. Hunter Mahan has the points lead going into the event with Rory McIlroy second. And moving on to U.S. Open tennis, American teenage sensation Cici Bellis, who captured everyone's attention in the first round, was unable to keep the magic going. Facing a tall order against Zarina Dias in round 2, she fought valiantly, pushing Dias to a third set, but ultimately fell to her more experienced opponent. Now on the other side of the spectrum, top seeds Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams both made it through the next round. And finally, let's round the bases and get to Friday's KBL matchup between the LG Twins and the SK Wyverns. LG's Woo Kyu-min, he takes on LG's Woo Kyu-min takes on SK's Choi Byung-yong. Now there's no score until the third when LG's Chung Sung-hoon, he hits a solo homer and one comes home later. Now we go to the next thing, LG's Son Ju-in, he gets the best of an epic 14-pitch at bat and later comes home off a Chung home run. Now 7-0 in the 8th, SK finally gets on board as Cho Dong-hwa hits the long ball, but Park Yong-taek extends LG's lead with a 3-run shot and the Twins win 12-2. And looking at the other games, Tusan takes down Samsung 2-1. Kia beats Lotte 9-5. Meanwhile, Nexon and Hanwha are still in this one. It's 9-9 in the top of the 9th inning. And that wraps it up for sports. This has been Stephen Che. Have a great weekend. But before that, it's your weather updates.
TGIF everyone, I'm Kim Bo-kyung with your weather updates. At the moment, parts of the central regions are getting rainy conditions accompanied by thunder and lightning, and also similar weather is occurring down along the southwestern coast. So through later tonight, 5 to 40 millimeters is forecast for Seoul and its surrounding areas, and approximately 5 millimeters for Jeju. Some good news for those of you making plans for this weekend, as warm and sunny conditions are in store, so make sure to soak up some of that vitamin D. The increasing gap in temperatures between the day and night seems to be telling us that fall is just around the corner, and in fact, autumn showers are expected by next Thursday. On to Saturday's numbers. Seoul starts off the day at 20 degrees before reaching 31 in the afternoon. Gwangju and Busan hit 30 and 27. As for other regions, Jeju and Kumgang hit 25, Dokdo reaches 23. That's all I have for you now. Hope you enjoy the rest of your Friday evening and have a lovely weekend.
Well, let's hope we get a quick salvation from that downpour out there. Well, that does it for Primetime News for this Friday. I'm Sean Lim.
And I'm Kang Chery. Have a great weekend, everyone, and we'll see you soon.